Design Leader Insights is brought to you by Fuego UX, a UX research, strategy, and design consultancy. Hey, Ryan, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, for sure. And as we get started, can you give the audience a little bit of insight into your journey in UX design?
Sure. So I'm currently head of design at Priceline, where I oversee our product design, marketing, design teams, and our user research teams. So we are responsible for anything you see on desktop, mobile web, or our iOS, Android apps, as well as email and social and any of those sorts of things. It's been a rather interesting journey for me. I started off, and this is in the late 90s. Long story short here, I ended up at NYU. I went to the Interactive Telecommunications program, which was master's program where you could really set your own space, right? Figure out where you want to go in the interactive telecom world. I focused on design and research and programming. So I took classes so I could understand programming and development better, even though I knew that wasn't what I was going to do. I took every class possible while I was there on both UX and UI design. I also took classes in research, right? So I just really wanted to understand the world better. I got a little bit of a break coming out of it. My thesis advisor was a guy named Bob Greenberg, who is the founder of RGA, which is an interactive agency. I spent a little over 5 years at RGA, moved to Yahoo just to see what the design world was like outside of agency. I had an opportunity to get involved with starting a business in the fitness space, kind of outside of the design world. I figured, why not give this a shot? Start a business. It'll probably take a year. You have severance from Yahoo. Why not? Right. And then get back into design. Learned a big lesson about how hard it is to be an entrepreneur and start a business. But that ended up being about 5 years. And I'd say about 3.5 years or so into it, I started trying to get back into design, doing freelance work. Ultimately, towards the tail end of it, landed a full-time job, was able to sell the business, worked at a company called Quora, which is a digital agency focusing on e-commerce, a lot of Magento and Shopify type of stuff. I was overseeing design and strategy there, moved on to a company called Pearson, which is it's in the ed tech space. Got there and realized it wasn't really the right fit for me in terms of where I wanted to be or what I wanted to be doing. So rather short stint there. The opportunity at Priceline came around less than a half year into that job. And I just kind of made the decision that I I knew I wanted to be in e-commerce and in B2C, and I couldn't pass it up. So now I'm at Priceline.
Sounds like you manage a lot of people there, and I think everyone knows it's kind of uncertain times. How do you keep a team motivated? I mean, not even during times like this, but just in general, like how do you lead and motivate the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few pieces of that. One, we all have a job to do. We were all hired to do a specific thing, and we're all good at what we do, and in one way or another. So let's focus on doing our jobs the best we can. Let's focus on learning and moving forward. And I think, one of the things that I've learned over time is we get a lot more concerned and worried about things that we think were going to happen that we don't know are actually going to happen. So we're kind of letting the fear of generally something that's more in the negative type of space get in our way of moving forward in a productive way. And I always like to try to think about, let's not worry about something that hasn't happened yet, right?
Yeah.
We don't know it happen. So stay focused on what we know we need to do, right? And that's the best way we could have an influence over a positive outcome, right? Because you can't always control what's going to happen, but I do firmly believe that you can always have an influence on what's going to happen. And I really believe that if we do the right things and we focus on what we know is meaningful at the time, in one way or another, it's going to help influence what that final outcome is going to be.
So what about the travel industry? What about the users? How does that come into, do you use that as like, hey, like this is who we're working for, like to drive motivation, or is that not really part of the consideration?
No, it absolutely is. I mean, that people love to travel. People continue to travel, and it's proven to be a real resilient industry. And that is meaningful. And I think we all just really understand that, it's the type of thing that we are working on is something that really, I think, helps people live a better life, right? Or help people get more meaning out of what they want to do. And that is, that is a really valuable, meaningful thing when you work on something that you believe in and is just doing something good and helping people. I think that really makes your job easier.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's switch gears to talking about starting a business and what that journey was like and hopping back into design.
Yeah, so I had an opportunity, and this is like a whole other long story. So we're just going to cut through a bunch of different chapters of this one, but I had an opportunity to help get involved with starting a health club. And it was building, building a gym, starting it from the ground up, no membership, no marketing, designing the space, coming up with marketing programs and how do you get people in the door. And I had never done that type of thing before. I've always been very enthusiastic and, love fitness and, but I've never actually been in that space myself. It took a long time. It took way longer to get there than I thought it would and made way more hours during the day than I thought it was going to take. Got to the point, it was around 3.5 years in where I think there was the right people working there that I was actually able to step away and start doing design work. That it's a tough space to be in, and making the money that you need in order to support a family was a challenge. So I had to get back into design at that point. And it was really, really difficult. And I had a good background. I had a great portfolio, despite it being a few years old. But when I decided I wanted to get back into it, no one really. First phase was like nobody wanted to talk to me. And then when people do talk to you, they don't really take you that seriously because it's like, well, like you're working in a gym, right? You're in a completely different field.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know how to answer that. And I thought that I was just going to be like, well, look at all this work I've done in the past. Look at these roles I've had in the past at big names, right? And I thought that would get me somewhere. It didn't really get me anywhere. I got kind of lucky because I had got an interview at another agency to do freelance work. The person there who was running that group was a colleague of mine when I worked at RGA. So we knew each other, which made it really easy for a designer. Understanding business, how a business works and what a business actually needs and how they need to communicate with their customers. That's hugely important.
And related to that, learnings, what advice do you have for new designers that might be hopping in the field today?
Yeah, I think, one thing that I think is important is be a generalist. I think a lot of designers feel this need to rush. You start doing design work, you land your first job, and all of a sudden you want to start focusing on like very specific or niche things in the design field, which is great, right? And ultimately it's a good place to head. But I would advise anyone just to spend a few years in the field, just learning about design, learning about businesses, learning about who your customers are and how you need to think about what your customers need and how you could bring that to them through design. Mm-hmm. I think that's the most important thing. When you're young and you're starting off in your career, you have a really long runway.
Yeah.
To move, right? It's a lot different than when you're later in your career. You've been doing this for 10 years, 15 years, whatever it might be. Then you have to think about things a little bit differently. When you're young, it's a really good time to learn about different aspects of design, whether it's accessibility, whether it's, more like content strategy, research, design systems, animations, prototyping, whatever those various things might be, like kind of spend a little bit of time on each of them, right? Figure out where you're really interested, where you want to focus, and start spending time on each of those specific things. Then you're at a point where you can then really think about like, this is really where I want to focus within design. Because I think where we've kind of gone is I think I think a lot of people do kind of find a focus and and that's, where they go. I start to see it a lot more, especially working on the brand side, whether it's design systems, accessibility, your other avenues of design, right? I really like doing this. I want to focus on doing that specific thing. And it's great. More so than just generally doing a little bit of everything, which is also fine, right? To do a little bit, but I kind of find that when you're young, start off, be generalist, learn as much as you can, read, talk to others. There's a lot of great resources out there now to connect, with other peers through social and other avenues such as that. Learn as much as you can, then figure
Yeah.
out what you're most interested in and go after those things.
Yeah, Ryan, love it. Thanks so much for joining the show today.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.